This is a model that Ted made to give us an idea of what the post office building looked like then from this angle. This is looking up towards the hill from the post office path side, and you can see that the veranda on the east was large, and the veranda on the south was a bit smaller, but it offered shade to that side of the building. This is an important photograph because it shows us the way Baba dressed before he started wearing the full-length sadra. This is his typical dress of the time before 1925, let's say. It's part of that series of photographs that was taken at Ghatkopar in 1923 in October. Being very frank by nature, Padre lost his temper and spoke some harsh words to someone during lunch on April 24th. Now, recall that Baba had passed the 2 rules regarding not saying unkind words and being cordial to the companions there. So with the 2 new rules in effect, as per the second rule, Baba bowed down to Padre for not following his instructions. Nervous happened to be standing nearby, and to tease him, Baba also quickly touched his feet. But Nervous took it seriously and he began to weep, saying that it would be better if he went away. Baba tried to console him, telling him, "I bow down to you of my own accord, not for any error on your part. There's nothing for you to object to." But Nervous was adamant about leaving Meherabad, however, thinking that Baba might do anything like this at any time and subject them to this kind of treatment, which was too much for him emotionally. Baba exempted Nervous from the second rule, and though he was willing to follow every one of the master's other instructions, that did not pacify him, and he insisted and remained firm in his resolve to leave. So Baba permitted Nervous to go and offered him train fare, but he refused because just a week before, Baba became very upset when one of the Hindu Mandali had asked him for some money to go and visit his mother in Pune. So another order had been passed regarding travel money. Don't ask him for money to go home. Baba then asked, "How will you travel without money?" And Nervous tearfully pointed to the gold buttons on his shirt. If you have seen those old-fashioned buttons, they were sewed onto a long cord. So the 2 buttonholes on the side of the shirt, you'd button the buttons right through both holes. So Baba says, "Oh, that's gold." So Baba grabbed the buttons and took them himself. And then Baba said, "All right, you can go on 2 conditions. One is that you have to beg for your food, and the other is that you do not borrow or steal." This is also looking forward, reminiscent to the New Life condition. Nervous accepted these conditions and was about to leave when Baba added, "But wherever you go, I will follow." So Nervous started to leave Meherabad, and Baba followed him along the road. Nervous glanced back and quickened his pace, but Baba stayed right behind, and he began running, and Baba too began running. And Nervous finally realized the humor of the situation and began laughing and returned to the post office with Baba. After Nervous had calmed down, Baba asked him why he was so dramatic. Nervous said that he became upset because Baba touched his feet even though he had done nothing wrong. Baba replied, "I did so because of some fault in you. Had I not touched your feet, how could you or others have known you had shortcomings? Had there been no offense, you could have remained quiet, considering it to be my wish. Although you have faults, you thought yourself faultless. I had to show you that it was not so." Baba then addressed everybody, concluded, "Although you are faultless, still you are at fault. But I will free all of you from your weaknesses. So always listen to me and remember to carry out whatever I say." Hearing that Baba wanted a white horse, Mera happily gave hers to him. Rustam brought the beautiful horse to Meherabad, where it was kept on the northeast corner of the mess quarters at the time. And that corner of the bungalow was converted into a stable. And soon after that horse was brought, the horse was named Sufi. Baba applied vermilion to the horse's forehead and sat on him for a few minutes. And as far as we know, that's the only time Baba ever sat on a horse. When Baba honored her horse in this way, the Mandali began to realize that Baba had a unique love for Mera. During the rest of that month, the flagstone verandas around the Jopti If you've seen the Jopti, you recall that there's a veranda there, a nice veranda. I don't believe that what flagstone is there now was the original flagstone. The flagstone verandas around the Jopti were completed using some pieces left over from the camp and some carted in from Ahmednagar. Although Rustam was living with his family, he was still under Baba's orders and was responsible for handling supply shipments to Meherabad. However, he would invariably make some mistake and be reprimanded by Baba because Baba's guidelines were so very strict. And usually those were about punctuality and frugality. A private bath enclosure was made for Baba behind the Jopti on the new veranda, and a banyan tree cutting was set where his bath water would drain there. There was a garden that was planted all around the Jopti. Jameli trees were planted in a few rows on each side. Other shrubs and things had been planted, but all of that has died off except for that original banyan tree. And if you recall, that huge banyan tree is flourishing, spreading drop trunks all around that vicinity. The tree that originally was watered by Baba's bath. By the end of April, an Irani disciple of Baba's named Ardashir had come to stay, and he had brought plenty of nice seasonal fruit. So Baba asked him about the possibility of having an orchard in Meherabad, like they had seen in Iran. He enthusiastically informed Baba that they could establish orchards at Meherabad and become self-sufficient. But the thing is, the Mandali would have to work harder. And Baba was especially interested in that part about the Mandali having to work even harder. And he encouraged this old tyrant, who first met Baba at Mazlamim, by declaring him to be the director of agriculture at Meherabad. So the work of preparing the grounds there to the south of the Jopti Garden began in earnest on April 30th. After just one day, the Mandali were exhausted, and Baba gave them a well-deserved day of rest. And in his diary for that day, Ramju wrote that he wondered how many of the Mandali would survive to finish the orchard, let alone to ever taste its fruits. Gulmai wanted Baba to wear something that distinguished him from the Mandali. So on April 30th, she presented Baba with that first long sadra, the first white robe made of thin muslin material, comfortable in the summer, which became Baba's standard dress from that day in 1924. During their conversation at the Jopti, one of the wealthy Orthodox Zoroastrians from Ahmednagar arrived at Meherabad with another person, another Zoroastrian. They walked straight towards Baba's Jopti, disregarding Barsok's request that they should remove their shoes before they approached Baba. Without introduction, he went straight to Baba and began asking impudent questions like, "What yoga do you practice?" And Baba said, "Labor yoga." "Why do you wear long hair and go about naked?" And Baba discreetly pointed to his boxer shorts under his pajama pants, and pointing to the man's English suit and hat, he asked, "Why do you put on a hat? Did Zoroaster the prophet ever dress like this?" The man was insulted and angrily retorted, "Yes, Zoroaster did dress like such clothes." And just saying anything, and Baba just systematically and calmly deconstructed the man's bogus arguments. Though he knew Baba was obviously wearing clothes, kept repeating that he was going around naked, and despite his arrogant tone, Baba continued to politely counter his illogical assertions. Failing to make Baba lose his temper, the two began shouting abuses. "You are a fake, a hypocrite. You are an imposter, and you misguide people." Adi finally reached his limit, and he shouted, if you remember Adi's nature, he shouted, "Get out at once." Baba immediately stopped Adi from saying anything further and told him to bow down to them and beg their pardon. And though he didn't like it, Adi obeyed and asked them to forgive his rude behavior. And he would tell us the story, how it irked him that he had to do such a thing. The men's attitude he didn't like, but he did it. But this humiliating gesture by the son of Kansab, Kaikushru, however, made them feel embarrassed, and they quietly left without any further incident. And the interesting thing is, after a few days, that man unexpectedly showed up at Meherabad alone and asked Baba to pardon his insolence. And we know from diaries in the further years that he occasionally came to Baba to pay his respects. Of course, the vast majority of visitors to Meherabad came with love and respect and somewhat of curiosity. One day, two of the impoverished low-caste boys from Arangan ventured to Meherabad. And Baba saw them and called them from the road, but they got scared and began to cry. So he came to them, comforted them, and engaged them in simple conversation in their own style of Marathi. Baba was very fluent in Marathi also. And what are your names? Where do you live? What do you do all day long? And talking to them in childlike conversation. And he asked Ustadji to bring something sweet from the store, which he gave to them. This mostly would happen in the shade of that tree, that neem tree, that was at the intersection of the road and the post office path. One of those trees that we had to remove when the road was expanded a few years ago. So naturally, the word spread quickly among the poor children in the village about that very loving new friend who was there nearby. And so the next day there were more kids, and Baba continued to entice them with snacks and play. And the number of these kids grew to over 30 boys, led by one of them who was handicapped, but was very strong in spirit to compensate for that. Baba would spend his time teaching them Tukaram nursery rhymes, simple Tukaram hymns in Marathi, and from some of the other great Marathi masters. And eventually the group was so big, he turned that task over to Arjun to continue training them. So they began to practice singing. And Baba most thoroughly enjoyed the chorus of their unsophisticated, discordant, squeaky voices as they sang. So that became a new evening program. And now we'll have a number from the Aurangam boys. And Baba would enjoy that and encourage them to keep singing. This taught them how they had to cooperate with each other and be in a group. This was the beginning of Meher Baba's work with children. To protect the new garden and orchard now from grazing animals, a barbed wire fence was installed along the four sides of the area. This went in front of what now is the Pilgrim Center, behind where now is the bus garages, and there was the fence that ran across that moat near the well on the west side, that is the roadside, right up to the Jopti garden itself. The Jopti garden was a separate area, and then there was the orchard. There was a water distribution chamber that was made there near the well, and the moat that ran water so that they could pump water out of the well and drop it into any point to irrigate the trees there. That orchard, by the way, lasted about 12 years. These were mango trees. They consumed a lot of water over those 12 years. It required a lot of care. And just as they were about mature enough to fruit, they all died. This is what one of those things was that formed Padri's attitude about planting things at Meherabad. What's the point? Everything will just die. Forget about it. So that's what we recall of Padri's experience of planting things at Meherabad. Baba was planning to fast in seclusion. So to prepare for this, he broke from his usual habit and ate a meal every 8 hours or so for a few days. And on the morning of May 7th, Baba was restless to begin. So the usual daily prayers at 5 a.m. were canceled so that the Mandali could focus on these final preparations for the Jopti. The materials to fix the mosquito screens on the windows and the ventilator openings had arrived. There were round ventilator openings above. So that material had arrived the previous day, so Baba was ready to begin after the installation of these things. And he wanted the work done quickly. He entered the Jopti for seclusion that day. But now he had begun a new thing, which was that he also stopped speaking. He would communicate by writing to one of the Mandali whose duty it was to be his attendant, and they would sit just outside of one of those low windows. So the purpose of those low windows was that Baba could sit inside and pass a message to one of the attendants who sat just outside. But after just a day and a half, on the evening of the 8th, Baba began to speak again from inside the room. He explained to the Mandali that his health had become very weak. Not from fasting or illness, because it had been such a short time, but because of the burden of his spiritual work. It was as if now that Baba had a permanent seat at Meherabad, it seemed he was finally really grappling with the immense spiritual inertia of the age for the first time. And it required tremendous effort to effect movement. Meanwhile, the Mandali continued with the labor of preparing the orchard. They hauled rocks in a handcart from as far as a quarter mile away to do this work where the water flew. Due to the continued expression of ill feeling between some of the Mandali, Baba summoned all of them to the Jopti on the morning of the 12th. After a critical berating of all of them, he dismissed them. One of the Hindu Mandali, that is Chiman Chaudhary, who was cooking for the Hindu Mandali, felt disheartened, and by the afternoon, he informed the others about his intention of leaving Meherabad. And though the Mandali tried their best to dissuade him, Baba gave him every chance to change his mind. He was determined to leave. Baba told the Mandali that anyone else who wanted to could leave also. When everyone else stayed put, he warned them to stick to him through thick and thin. Baba came out of that first Jopti seclusion on the 15th, and he wanted to go back into seclusion soon. However, there were also plans to celebrate Upasni Maharaj's birthday there in a big way. To maintain his seclusion and yet allow people to see him, Baba had Padri make a screen door for the Jopti. One day, Baba was in the mood to play a game of hide and seek. He told the Mandali that he would hide and send Masaji to the post office to inform them to begin looking for him. The conditions, he said, were he would stay in that area. I won't go to the village or up the hill. After Baba was hidden, Masaji returned and told the Mandali to begin their search. They looked for about an hour without finding Baba, and one of them said, despite telling us that he would stay here, Baba must have gone to the village or up the hill. You know how he often says one thing and does another. When they finally gave up, Masaji led them to the Jopti, which was locked from the outside. He opened the door, and Baba stepped out. He said, I told Masaji to lock me in. I was so close to you, yet you saw the lock and used your minds and looked anywhere else instead of trusting my words. In the same way, I am hiding within your own self. I am in you all. I am your very life. Seeking me outside, here and there, can never find me. So try to find me within. On the 18th, Baba went back into the Jopti for seclusion, fasting but not keeping silence. The Mandali focused on preparing Meherabad for the birthday celebration. That day, Nervous went to Nagar to bring necessary items. While he was at Khushru quarters, Concept Khushru spoke rudely to him. Of course, after Nervous returned to Meherabad, Baba, in his apparently casual but very thorough way, extracted the whole story from him. And Baba immediately called Adi and told him that he was very disappointed with his family, telling him, any ill treatment to my Mandali is an insult to me. After stating that he was going to leave the place, Baba told Adi to go to Nagar and ask his father why he had behaved so rudely, and to tell his brother Rustam not to bother coming to Meherabad anymore. He was free to live in any way he wished. However, on his way to town, Adi met his brother Rustam there coming to Meherabad, and so they both returned hoping to speak to Baba. At Adi's request, Baba agreed to discuss the matter with Rustam. After an extended conversation, Rustam agreed to a fresh commitment to carefully follow Baba's word, irrespective of his father's attitude. Baba had promised Daulat Mai, Mera's mother, that if he ever allowed women in the ashram, she would be among the first to be called. At last, he sent her and Mera the telegram they were waiting for. Daulamasi, Baba's eldest maternal aunt, and two other women had already been staying in the refurbished bathing room building during the days leading up to Maharaj's birthday celebration. Daulat Mai and Mera joined them there when they arrived at Meherabad on May 19th. And so it was exactly 1 year after they first had Baba's darshan at Meherabad that now 17-year-old Mera came to stay there with her mother. At the time, she had no idea that she would become his most important disciple. Upasni Maharaj's birthday was celebrated on May 20th that year with guests and visitors of all types arriving from all around. And though Baba stayed in seclusion inside the Jopti, he did give personal interviews to everyone through the screen door. After lunch at 1 o'clock, everyone gathered there in front of the Jopti while Baba remained inside behind the screen door. That pandal was there, simple pandal, to give shade for the afternoon program of devotional music and inspirational recitations. And at sunset, the traditional Hindu birth ceremony was performed by placing the photograph of Maharaj in a small cradle and swinging it in the Hindu fashion. But then suddenly, powerful winds began to blow, followed by thunder and lightning that made it impossible for anybody to continue telling stories. As it began to rain, the prasad was quickly distributed, and Baba ordered everyone to take shelter in the mess quarter building and have their supper there. After the rain stopped and supper was over, everyone was called back to the Jopti to hear devotional music, and the performance went on till midnight. Then everybody went to sleep. And due to the long day, the next day, Baba canceled the 2 hours of prayer for the Mandali, and they were allowed the luxury of sleeping in till 7 a.m. The guests left, for the most part, including all the women except Daulamasi, Daulat Mai, and Mera. They were assigned the work of cooking rice and dal every day for the Mandali. Nervous was the only one from the men who had contact with them there at the bathing room building, since he had to carry all the water they needed from the well. After 5 days of seclusion, Baba came out of the Jopti on the 23rd and called all those at Meherabad who had dedicated their lives to him and asked each of them to take another serious oath to stick to him. Dr. Ghani and Abdul Tayyib arrived in Tayyib's car to stay a few days, and he offered the use of his car for Baba while he was at Meherabad. Rustam came and asked Baba on behalf of his father permission for Adi to attend the wedding of their cousin, Sarosha's sister, which was to take place that evening in Abhinagar. Sarosha's sister Motan was being married to Keki Irani, the man who took those beautiful photographs of Baba, the one that you see on the screen now, in 1923. And of course, Rustam said it would be nice if Adi was clean-shaven. Baba very reluctantly gave his permission. Then there was more discussion about Rustam's in-laws, that is, mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Daulat Mai and Mera were there, and wouldn't it be nice if they attended the wedding too? Baba allowed it under the condition that they had to keep the order that he had given the early Iranian Parsi women who were staying with him at the time. That is, they had to wear this thing called matu banu, which is a very old-fashioned scarf tied over their hair tightly, like a peasant woman, and a long-sleeved blouse of simple cotton. And this is how they were to attend the wedding. After the wedding, they returned at 10:30 p.m., and Baba severely chided Adi for breaking the continuity of the Mandali order. All of them had to not shave, telling him that he might as well go back home and live to his full satisfaction there. Adi just stood and kept quiet while Baba continued scolding him. Eventually, Baba cooled down and allowed Adi to stay. But the family, giving more importance to social convention than his wish, irked Baba. The next day, Baba's mood was even more disturbed. The dominant topic of conversation was whether they should continue staying on this property, considering Concept Kaikushu's recent attitude. Concept liked Baba, but he couldn't understand this perfect master business much. He was a worldly man. He was caught between trying to please his family, who had great affinity for Baba and Upasi Maharaj, and following the social and cultural traditions of his community that was adamantly opposed to Meher Baba, and which he was attracted to. He liked that social life. But as God in human form, Meher Baba had taken birth to do that work that only he could do. And he had a limited lifespan to accomplish that work. So there was no time for him to wait for people to overcome their preconceived misconceptions about him. Instead, he would take the brunt of their derisive antagonism and incorporate it into his spiritual work, which would effect a gradual, universal disintegration of religious and cultural bigotry. And I do believe we see the effect of that even to this day. The day was passing in an atmosphere of Baba's critical feeling towards Adi and his family when Rustam and Mother Gulmai arrived. When Baba directed his complaints to Rustam, who had been deluged with such messages from Baba since the early morning, going back and forth, he reached the limit of his patience and he responded rudely to Baba. Baba was deeply offended, and exclaiming that he was leaving Arangan never to return, he walked quickly to Abdul Tayyib's car parked near where the Dunya is now. Baba sat in the car and signaled his Mandali to get in as much as they could squeeze in until the springs on the car were just overloaded. They were just hanging onto the car. That's Baba's order. With Baba leaving them like this, the women who were there and some of the men even began to cry. Baba signaled Tayyib, "Start your engine." And the car was about to move. And even Gulmai, who had been stoic for so long, burst into tears. Witnessing this poignant scene, many people rushed to the car, asking Baba to pardon them for any rude words, pleading with him to stay. Rustam begged Baba's forgiveness. In that tense atmosphere, the discussion went on for quite some time, with everyone beseeching and Baba reminding them that he can never be obligated to anyone for the use of any property. Finally, reluctantly, Baba agreed to stay under these conditions. 1, Adi should no longer stay with him. 2, Rustam, Kansab, and no one else from their family should come to Meherabad. And 3, the Meherabad land should be legally transferred to either Adi or Gustaji's name. Baba got out of the car and, referring to Gulmai, said, "It is only because of Mother that I have alighted." Remember, he referred to Gulmai as his spiritual mother. The serious atmosphere persisted the next day. Rustam returned in the afternoon with news that his father was hesitant about transferring the property into Adi's name. Kansab Kaikushu had remarked, "Does Baba consider me to be so faithless that he does not trust me to hold ownership of the property?" In response, Baba brought up the subject again of finding somewhere else to live to establish an orchard. Adi got excited and exclaimed, "You are simply seeking any excuse to quit this place. If you think this property unsuitable, why did you select it as your permanent camp in the first place?" Then Gustaji interrupted Adi for raising his voice with Baba, and the two began to argue. And Baba intervened, ordering Adi to keep quiet, but in the heat of the rage, Adi was lost in his quarrel with Gustaji, and at this point, Baba gave him a hard slap, and Adi was immediately shocked into silence. Adi broke down sobbing, and Baba consoled him lovingly. Adi pleaded with Baba, "Don't leave here. Please forgive our mistakes and make Meherabad your headquarters." Baba sent Rustam to Nagar to talk with his father again. Ramju followed after a while to help persuade Kansab. They both returned with a note from Kansab in which he had written, "I am most willing to act as Meher Baba requests regarding the property. I ask his forgiveness for some misunderstanding when I first replied to his request." By evening, it was decided that Meherabad would be Meher Baba's permanent base once again. To change the mood, Baba took 13 of the men on an outing to Ellora the next morning. But that afternoon, he asked them how they would feel about returning to Meherabad because he was still a bit depressed about the recent events. However, some of the men expressed interest in continuing the tour since they had never seen the place, so Baba assented. But from that point, they began to experience one calamity after another with the two cars as Baba grew more restless. Constant tire problems and then stuck in the mud. They finally arrived back at Meherabad the next afternoon, covered with mud and exhausted. Baba's restlessness continued the next day, and he proposed that they might go to Kashmir and be occupied with orchard work there. Throughout the day, he asked the Mandali of their opinions. Some were in favor of a change, and some felt it was better to stay at Meherabad. When Rustam arrived the next day, he was clearly depressed about Baba's dissatisfaction with remaining at Meherabad. Baba asked the rest of the Mandali, "Who else is depressed in my company?" Many hands were raised to admit that they were not in the best of moods. And Baba advised anyone who felt too tired to give him up, but none did. The discussion about traveling north continued the next day, May 30th now. But now Quetta became the favored destination, since they were already acquainted with the area. A telegram was sent to Rusi there to make inquiries about unoccupied property. Baba wanted to leave the next day by car with 5 of the Mandali, including Sarosh as one of the drivers. Baba had teased Rustam a few weeks earlier while he was in seclusion, knowing that Rustam was attached to his new car. Baba told him that he wanted to use it to drive far up to the north. Now he told Rustam to have his car ready for the long trip by early the next morning. However, when Sarosh arrived that afternoon and was informed of the new plan, he related to Baba how upset his father was that he traveled even as far as Alora with Baba without his father's permission, and that after their serious argument, he knew his father would never allow him to go on such a trip that far away. And Sarosh's father, remember, also named Kaikushu, married to Kanseb's sister. And because of that link and the fact that Kanseb Kaikushu first began the business through his brother-in-law Kaikushu, who was related to Bijayarani, there was always a feeling of obligation to Kaikushu elder, who would help him become established in business in Ahmednagar. So there was all this thing in the background that they had to deal with. And though Sarosh's father had no stake in the Arangam property, they had leased the Kushru quarters property together. So there was that tie that was a complication. It was a joint family. Now with Sarosh as a driver out, the plan to drive north was canceled. Meeting with the Mandali, Baba informed them of the latest developments and asked their opinion of staying on there. When faced with this constant antagonism, he actually said, "Should we stay on here with the way Sarosh's father regards us?" And now there was a unanimous chorus of nay. The next 2 days were spent making arrangements for the new plan. Baba and most of the Mandali then left Meherabad on the morning of June 2nd to stay in Bombay for a few days. And after this period of difficulty for Adi, while they were in Bombay, Mera recalled that she peeked in the door one day, and there was Adi massaging Baba's feet, and she knew then, she said, how close Adi was to Baba, that he was one of the very close disciples. Baba expressed his appreciation to Adi during that time for coming through that difficult period with his family. It was a test that Adi had passed. While they were in Bombay, Baba ordered Padri and Nervous to take the white horse Sufi and the ox, who was named Saint, to Sakuri to be presented as gifts to Pasi Maharaj. They had to lead the animals to the station in Ahmednagar from Meherabad, put them on a freight car, and again walk them the final 9 miles to Sakuri. Because they were Baba's special animals, they could not be ridden or whipped. And the problem was that these were not docile animals. The horse, Sufi, had a habit of biting, and the ox liked to kick. The Padri would focus on the path ahead, leading the horse. The horse would carefully move forward and nip him, in the kidney area. If you're familiar with horses, they can do that, and it hurts like hell. Man against beast, though. Finally, the quartet arrived at Sakuri late at night. However, Pasi Maharaj was not in a good mood. So instead of being welcomed, they were verbally abused by him, though he did allow them to spend the night there. Hoping his mood had improved, They tried to offer the animals again the next morning, but Maharaj shouted, "Someone call the police! These two thieves are trying to pass off these stolen animals to me." So Padri and Nervous had to drag the horse and the bull all the way back to Ahmednagar, where they would become the responsibility of Rustam. At one point in the journey, Nervous got too close behind the ox, which gave him a vicious kick to the knee. Baba and some of the Mandali left Bombay by train on June 6th, traveling to Quetta. Before they left, Padri and Nervous arrived in Bombay, exhausted, and gave the report to Baba, who said, "Well, you tried." Due to the exhaustion of the trek to Sikori and the injury to his knee, Nervous's immunity was compromised, and by the end of the month, he had contracted typhoid there in Quetta. Baba ordered the best of care for him, but he died in Quetta on July 16th, just after Baba had left there. And his body is buried in the cemetery there. Remember, Nervous was the one Baba asked to make the first signboard of Meherabad. And his death marked the end of that intense first period there at Meherabad, the establishing of Meherabad through the Gamela Yoga phase. Baba traveled through the north and south of India during the next 2 months, August and September, with just a few of the men Mandali, Padri, Behramji, and Gustaji, mostly. By the last week of September, he returned to Meherabad. Daulat Mai then, 17-year-old Mera, and Gul Mai's 14-year-old niece, Khorshid, small Khorshid, had been staying at Khushru quarters during the previous month. And Baba had given them a few specific orders to occupy some time every day. One of the things they had to do was write the name of Yazdan on little pieces of paper and roll them up and store them. Another thing they had to do, a practical thing, was to make shirts. Baba wanted to make shirts in 3 different sizes out of simple khadi cloth. Baba returned to Meherabad in September, and occasionally he would call them out to have his darshan. And he would ask them whenever they came, how many shirts? They would give him the number. I would say, not enough yet. Work more quickly. Make more. After about 100 shirts were ready, Baba told them that it was sufficient. And so Daulat Mai bundled up the shirts, and there was a day designated for a poor program at Meherabad. The shirts were sent in one bullock cart, and another bullock cart carried sacks of parched rice and roasted chickpeas. When the women arrived in Meherabad that afternoon, Baba was on the post office veranda playing the dholak, singing Marathi bhajans with a few of the villagers. He motioned the women to wait. They sat down and thoroughly enjoyed the music until he was finished. And after the music, the distribution program began. Now, there were 3 of the Mandali with Baba at Meherabad during this phase: Gustaji, Masaji, and Padri. Gustaji and Masaji opened the bundles of shirts while Padri opened the sacks of prasad. Baba began with the smallest children. So first he would call a little boy, like a 3-year-old boy, who would have to come with his mother, sitting on his mother's lap, and he would give the mother and the boy the shirt, and then he would have the mother hold out her sari, and he would fill that portion up with the prasad, one after another. Then the medium-sized boys came, and when they were all finished, then the larger boys, and the larger they came, the more prasad Baba would give to them. And all of these shirts and sacks of prasad were all distributed that time. All the villagers, when it was over, left, laughing and shouting, "Sadhguru Meher Baba Ki Jai," and went down the road towards the village. Baba turned to Daulat Mai and said, "See how happy they are? Now don't you feel happy too?" Yes. After the program, he told the women that they could pack up their belongings at Khushru quarters and be ready to move to Meherabad soon. Baba and the 3 men left for another short trip to Bombay. And you remember that story that Khorshid and Mera would tell. Khorshid told Mera that since they were moving to Meherabad, they ought to renounce all comforts and lead a simple life. And so they decided to give up using pillows and sleep on their thin, there weren't even mattresses, kind of pads on the floor. They began sleeping on just straw mats on the floor. And they stopped wearing any footwear. They were doing what they had done in Sakori when they stayed with Upasya Maharaj. One day in mid-October, after Baba had returned from Bombay, he called Dalit Mai Mera and Small Khorshid from Kushu quarters and his aunt Dalamasi and cousins Naja and Big Khorshid from Pune to stay at Meherabad. Baba and the three men moved out of the post office onto the veranda outside, allowing the 6 women to take up residence inside the building. So these 6 were the first long-term women residents of Meherabad. As they were unpacking, Baba came inside and asked, "Have you brought good bedding? Let me see what you have brought. You must keep good health here. You can't be cold or you'll fall ill." And as Baba was inspecting all their bedding, he noticed that 2 did not have pillows. And he asked, "Whose bedding is this? Where are your pillows?" So Khorshid said, "We don't use pillows." "Why not?" Khorshid and Mera were there, and he said, "Why are you two looking at each other?" And sheepishly Khorshid said, "Baba, we thought we could do without pillows." No, you must use pillows." "And where are your chappals?" "Well, Baba, we thought we should walk barefoot. That's what we did in Sakori." Baba said, "This is not Sakori. Here you must wear sandals. You will wear warm things and do everything I say. Otherwise, you can go back to Ahmednagar." No, Baba, Khorshid said, we'll do whatever you say. We'll obey." Baba explained, "We don't have doctors here. You have to keep well and you have to work hard. So take care of your health. That is doing service. Sleeping without pillows is not going to make you any more spiritual or make you love God anymore." Baba sent someone to Ahmednagar, probably Padri, to bring 2 cotton pillows. And so Mera and Khorshid slept with pillows that very night. And yes, they came to appreciate their pillows. And they learned that Baba was very practical. The very first morning of the stay in the post office, Dalit Mai shook Mera awake before 5 a.m. when it was still dark outside. She said, "Come on, get up. Baba's already up and he's singing." They would hear Baba singing outside in the morning. Not only did Baba have a great love for music and singing, but those who heard his voice, those people, those early Mandali, we would ask them, and they would say it's hard to describe. They called it a perfect instrument. His rhythm and pitch were flawless. And the tone of his voice has been described as being similar to maybe an enchanting flute, or sometimes Padri would say like bells. Padri and Masterji would carry water from the well to the post office. In those days, Gustaji was Baba's personal attendant, helping him wash and shave after getting up in the morning. The women would make Baba's tea on a kerosene stove, not on a wood stove, because Baba didn't like that smoky taste it gave the tea. Baba usually drank his tea from that same aluminum lota, that mug, the same one he used for taking a bath, washing. He would drink his tea from that also. Tea they drank in the morning had no milk in it. It was wheat tea with lemongrass and mint, and at that time, and just a pinch of sugar. They had no other breakfast at that time. No bread and butter and no chapati, because the women had not started their cooking yet, so they would eat later. After 4 or 5 days, Baba gave the women an order not to read or write. For those first days, Mera had brought some of her favorite books, and in the evening, while Baba was with the men, she had been reading from them to the other girls to help them improve their English. But after his order, the books were sent back to Ahmednagar. One morning before sunrise, as the women were busy with their work in the post office, they heard Baba singing in the distance. As was usual, they stayed quiet as Baba came closer. And standing by the window, Dalit Mai turned quickly and whispered, "Baba is dancing." So they all rushed to the window, and just for a moment in the dawnlight, they saw Baba do a few very graceful movements and gestures as he sang the song. It was a Hindi song that Small Khorshid had sung for him only a few times, and is normally sung by a girl. The song is about someone who has renounced everything for God and become a sannyasi. And Baba, according to Khorshid, was using a shawl and had done some very graceful movements. But when Baba saw that they were watching, he quickly turned the corner and went away. They never heard him sing that song again. But you've heard that story of them hearing Baba sing and seeing him dancing. That was it. One day, Baba came inside the post office and sat on a small carpet. He asked Mera to sit, and he told her, "Now, from today, you are my orderly." She was to hold the soap and the towel and pour water over Baba's hands when he washed and to serve him his tea. Gustaji was instructed to give Baba's trunk to her, in which all his personal belongings were kept. Mera was happy and excited that she would be washing Baba's clothes, the plate from which he ate and the mug from which he drank. When Baba had his bath, Mera would bring his clothes to be washed to the original well, and she would wash his clothes on those large flat stones there. She drew water from the well and used simple bar soap to scrub his clothes on those stones there. And after the clothes were washed, she would carry them back and hang them on the clothesline near the post office. Gulmai usually arrived around 9 a.m. every day, and she would comb Baba's hair. And then one day, when Gulmai could not come, Baba told Mera to comb his hair. This was the first time. He sat on the floor in the post office, and Mera knelt behind him. She was really careful to do it very well so that she might not miss the opportunity again in the future. Sometimes during the days then, Baba would stroll up and down the long post office veranda singing and occasionally commenting to the women who were inside. If the visitors came, he might give them some spiritual explanation or discourses. Though the women were occupied with work inside the post office, they were absolutely preoccupied with listening to Baba outside there. Sometimes in the evening, Baba would ask the three girls, Meher Nazar and Small Khorshid, to massage his feet and maybe tell him a story. Sometimes he would ask them to sing something. Of the women, of course, Small Khorshid had the best voice, and she learned all those songs of Huma during that time. One morning, Baba came into the post office and asked Mera if she knew any English songs. The only one she could think of was Swanee, that song by George Gershwin. So Baba asked her to teach it to him. And so line by line, she sang the tune, and Baba learned it. He told her that was his first English song. The next morning, as Mera was bringing his tea out, she heard Baba singing the song perfectly. On November 18th, Baba began another week of silent seclusion in the Jopti with Padri as his attendant. Padri was ordered to look down so as not to see Baba's face whenever he had to attend to anything inside the Jopti. One night during the period of his silence, Baba wanted a drink of water. He clapped, but Padri was sound asleep on the veranda outside the window there. When Padri woke up in the morning, he found a note placed outside the window expressing Baba's displeasure. "You son of a swine, I have been thirsty for 3 hours, and you have been sleeping. Even my clapping doesn't awaken you. Are you afflicted with the sleep of Kumbhakarna?" Now, Kumbhakarna was the younger brother of Ravana in the story of Ram, the Ramayana. And it's a long story, but the short of it is that Kumbhakarna slept for 6 months. After a relatively quiet 7 weeks with Baba at Meherabad, they all left with him for Bombay during the first week of December. It was a time for these early women to learn and become accustomed to life with Baba in the ashram. And he told them that they had no idea how fortunate they were to be with him at Meherabad then. And little did they understand that soon would come the time for the multitudes. From early December of 1924, Meher Baba had spent 7 weeks in Bombay with several of his disciples. And while they were there, Baba did another week of silent seclusion, fast. By 1925, he began to talk about staying at Meherabad permanently. And on January 25th, he returned to Meherabad with many of his men and women Mandali. The next day, he went into silent seclusion in the Jopti again, with Padri outside as the attendant once again. After some days, he came out and began directing the affairs of the new colony. The women were staying in the post office building again, while the men were busy setting up temporary shelters just opposite the post office path to the south side there and near the Jopti. Several hundred people, including all his family, attended Baba's 31st birthday. This is the east side of the post office that you see with the gable truss up there. And overhead, you can see the simple burlap that they use for a pando covering. There are many of the close disciples here in this photograph, but I will just, to make it simple, point out the tall man in the back, and that is Padre. You can see Konsaheb holding his first grandchild sitting near Baba in the front. They attended Baba's birthday celebration there at Meherabad on February 18th. And the festivities took place all around that post office veranda. You can see it was decorated with festoons of flowers and leaves there. Everyone enjoyed that simple birthday feast, which included sweet rava and milk tea, which was still a rare treat for the Mandali, tea with milk in it. There was bhajan singing and, of course, Baba's darshan for everyone. And on that day, for the first time, Baba allowed the women to wash his feet. He told Gulmai to pour that water back into the well. And he commented, "The water of this well will always be my prasad." Due to an incident, however, Baba was in a serious mood when this photograph of the occasion was taken. It happened when Naja was walking across the veranda there. Seeing a dog, she recalled the funny scene of it stealing curd from the kitchen, and she chuckled. Baba called her, stood up, and slapped her soundly. He was angry and fumed. "You are laughing at men. You are prancing about, creating a spectacle. I don't like women laughing and behaving like this in front of men." Hurt and humiliated, Naja retreated into the post office to work and weep there quietly. However, Baba's scolding was not meant for Naja. Some of the women from Bombay were talking and tittering amongst themselves, and Baba did not appreciate the way they were behaving in his presence. In a suddenly serious atmosphere, Baba repeated, "I don't like men and women laughing with each other in my presence. Whatever they want to do outside is their business, but not in front of me." Baba sent the guests away for rest and then called Naja. He embraced her and explained, "I didn't mean to beat you, but I had something in mind. I wanted to set an example for others." He kissed her and said, "Now don't worry, forget about it." This was an early example, through the years. More than one of Meher Baba's close Mandali people would be the vicarious target for his arrows of humiliation to impart lessons to those who did not have the inner strength to be able to bear his reprimand. This is a closer view of the birthday celebration. Hindu is there. Dr. Ghani's brother Abdul Rahman is there on the left. You see people like Padre's mother, rare shot, standing behind. She was Dalit, my sister. Remember, Padre and Mera were first cousins. Padre's mother and Mera's mother were sisters. Baba's brother Adi is in the foreground here, the young boy. Dolly is there, Adi and Rustam's sister. She was also one of the women residing there occasionally. One day soon after the birthday, Baba sent a message inside to the women that whoever had a gold ring should send it out to him. Big Khorshid, married to Baba's brother Jamshid, thought that surely Baba didn't mean that he wanted her wedding ring. And the only other one there was Mera. So with difficulty, Mera removed the ring that Upasi Maharaj had personally put on her finger and handed it over to Gustaji. Soon Baba stepped into the post office. He put the ring from Upasi Maharaj back onto Mera's finger, and then onto the same finger of her left hand, Baba placed another gold ring. Inside this heart-shaped ring was inscribed, Baba. He told her never to take them off. And so she would wear these rings for the rest of her life. All the later photographs, we still see those two rings on Mera's finger. One day when some of the Mandali living away were visiting Meherabad, Baba decided to have a game of cricket. He ran to the post office and told Mera to quickly tie his hair with a ribbon. She would fondly remember this incident. And then, like an impatient schoolboy, he tucked his sadra into his short pants and ran to the field in front of the post office there, it was that open field at the time, to play cricket with the men. You know, Meher was an excellent all-round cricketer. Baba loves cricket. One day on the post office veranda, Baba told Mera, "I love you more as Baba than I as Krishna loved Radha." It was the duty of the women Mandali to cook for the growing colony, yet at the same time, Baba began increasing the restrictions on them. Another order Baba had given the young women after they had come to stay in the post office building the previous October was to not touch or even speak to any men. And this probably happened because Nadia would spend a lot of time talking with her father, Masaji, who was one of the three men who was staying there at Meherabad with Baba the previous October. The only exception to that order was Gustaji, who, according to Baba, and it was very obvious, was very pure in nature. Gustaji and Dalit Mai jointly operated the store for the growing colony, situated at the west end of the post office veranda, and that is that narrow section of veranda on the south side of the building itself. A wall of woven bamboo was installed to form a private compound with the kitchen and toilets on the north side of the building. The only door to the post office was in that north wall. Mera and the other Andheri, they were referred to not even as women or by name, they were only referred to by the Mandali as Andheri. Andheri means insiders. They rarely left this area during those 22 months. This time came to be known as the first long stay at Meherabad. They would often be awakened early in the morning by the sound of Baba's voice. After washing, he would sit on a wooden crate on the veranda to have his tea, chatting with anyone who was present. And generally, the men sat along the south side of the veranda, which is opposite of the barricade, and the women along the north. A special chutney of cool water was kept inside one of the three windows on the south wall, that is near where the store was, so that Baba could reach in between the bars for a drink whenever he wanted. Though they couldn't always see him, the women were enthralled by his voice when he was sometimes explaining spiritual subjects or singing as only he could sing. Rare was the person who was not attracted to him. So now the local children, who were mostly very poor, were especially excited about Meher Baba's return. He would sit and playfully talk with them, and usually in the shade of that tree, and he would tell them how they should wash their faces and keep themselves clean and encourage them to have good habits of hygiene. Then would sing with them. And by the end of February, the number of boys from Oregon coming to Meherabad for the daily bhajan singing had increased considerably, because that was continuing now with Arjun. A small temple of bamboo matting and paper was constructed for the low-caste boys who had no such things in the village, so that they could have a place to sing bhajans. Since the word was spreading that Meher Baba was now staying in one place, the number of devotees longing to stay with Baba and the visitors to Meherabad was increasing, as was the number of sick and afflicted people looking to him for some relief, the poor. Baba wanted to keep the growing colony occupied in a positive manner, and every day there were discussions there with the Mandali concerning proceeding with meaningful work. And essentially it was Baba at one point saying to all these new people coming, "What do you think you're doing here? You're coming here to eat? And what are you going to do all day long? Stare at me? We have to do some meaningful work for these people." So that's the way Baba made them develop the attitude that they should feel obligated to serve. They weren't obligating anybody by serving them. So on the festival day of March 21st, many visitors came to celebrate the Zoroastrian New Year, Jamshedi Nowruz, which included another simple feast for the hundreds of people attending of all different religions. And with the crowds there, Baba took the opportunity to officially open the Meher Charitable Dispensary and Hospital. The new facility was arranged in the old mess quarters and offered free medical care to all persons regardless of caste, creed, and religion, as it was mostly staffed by some of the Mandali. Pendu was appointed as the manager and Padri as the compounder of medicines, because remember, medicines then were basic ingredient, and the prescription by the doctor was compounded on site in a dispensary. That was Padri's work. These were very widespread. A local ophthalmic surgeon was hired as the doctor and director of the hospital. At the opening ceremony, with Kansab Kaikushu standing by, Baba asked Rustam to unlock the front door there on the left with a key that had been specially decorated for the occasion. Baba addressed the crowd in Marathi, telling them, "Take care of your health and do your best not to fall ill. But if you do, then don't hesitate to come here for treatment and medicine." Another little temple of colored cloth stretched over a wooden frame was constructed for the higher caste boys in the same area as the other, west of the road. And as he had done the previous year, Baba encouraged the Hindu boys to observe their religious celebration. One man was appointed to do puja there, that is at the higher caste place. And every evening there was puja and prayers as per their custom. March 25th, Gudi Padwa, that is the Hindu New Year, was celebrated at the two temples. And the main event of the day, however, was the opening of a free boarding school there just near the post office, in front of the post office, for the growing number of boys coming from Warangal. The students were given uniforms and school supplies, and they were fed simple but nutritious meals on a regular schedule, cooked mostly by the women Mandali. That was the women Mandali's work, to supply food for the schoolboys. At first, the school was comprised of a few simple temporary buildings of bamboo matting on wooden frames, but within a few weeks, a better, larger facility was constructed of corrugated sheets. That is to the northeast of the post office building. Two of the original Pune Mandali were given the responsibility of education, health, hygiene, and feeding of the untouchable boys, who comprised the majority of the students. Vishnu served as a teacher, and Arjun, who had worked with the boys the previous year, was named by Baba Director of Depressed Class Education, though he was mostly illiterate. Baba praised his exemplary obedience and dedication. Two other men taught the smaller, higher caste section, which at the time was situated in the south hall of the bungalow. The old bungalow had two halls. The north hall was where the hospital was. The beds in the hospital were there. And the south hall at that time was used for the higher caste school boys and girls. And the schools were named in honor of Baba's first master, as you know, Hazrat Babashah, called the Hazrat Babashah School. The schools function as per government curriculum, but with the added benefit of Baba's personal attention, plus his explanations about the deeper aspects of life. Being very particular about their habits of cleanliness, Baba would inspect the boys each morning and make them wash again if he was not satisfied with their state of hygiene. Baba would also wash the clothes of these boys. Every day, he would take a certain number of clothes from certain boys and go to that same spot at the well on those flat rocks where Mera would wash his own clothes and wash the clothes of the schoolboys. Sometimes he would help them do it to teach them the most efficient techniques of how to use the soap liberally and how to get their clothes really clean. And in the beginning, he would personally bathe these boys at least once a week, there also right near the well, allowing a few of the Mandali to draw water or to hand him soap or towels, but being very particular about giving them a thorough scrubbing. He could wash 8 or 9 boys per hour, and he usually worked 3 to 4 hours per shift. That's a lot of work. As the enrollment increased, Baba had a few of the Mandali assist him in giving haircuts and baths to the boys. But initially, he insisted on doing this work himself. The flagstones from that bathing area are still there, but we've covered them with some soil to keep them preserved. One day, 2 higher caste men came while Baba was bathing the boys. And Baba told them, "You have come for the darshan of God, but the God I worship is in these poor Harijan boys. If you wish to serve God, you may join me. Otherwise, you can go back to your temple and worship your God in your own way." And the 2 men could not overcome their social prejudices and went away. This first long stay was Baba's great work of a few things. One, bringing up the low caste people, not only by developing habits of hygiene and cleanliness and respect, but by breaking down the deeply ingrained caste system. So eventually, through the months ahead, patiently, yet surprisingly quickly, Baba took down all those barriers. Soon, the school that had the higher caste boys was integrated gradually with the lower caste boys. And the Hazrat Babajan School then was only the facility near the post office. That building went through another 3 phases of addition as the population of students increased. It was not only for the local poor people. Remember, this is God working. Meherabad was the spiritual microcosm, and all of these people were archetypes in that great work in the spiritual microcosm to effect the great changes spiritually in not only this world, but the universe. And I'm convinced of it by observing what has happened through the years since Baba took on that work. It also was for the Mandali themselves. The Hindu Mandali still had their habits of cooking separately and doing things separately from the other men from the different religions and different castes. But by the end of that first long stay, as a matter of fact, during the last week of the first long stay, everything disintegrated. And you can see Baba's carefully allowing that disintegration to happen. And then he gave them the ultimatum, which was, anybody staying with me must agree to do anything I tell them to do, trusting that I know the limits of their capacities. Anyone staying with me must be willing to drink water from the well that has been brought out by anyone whom I deem fit to bring it up, whatever caste or religion. And anyone staying with me will eat the same food from the same kitchen. And now if you don't like it, you can go away. This was all done and finished by the time they left Meherabad, November 25th, 1926. It is a very dramatic first long period there in the history of Meherabad. The stories are incredible. But that preparation work was done at Meherabad for that time so that when they returned to Meherabad a month later, December 25th, 1926, the great work for Meher ashram would begin. This was Baba's final work with children, specifically boys, giving them education with spiritual training. The emphasis was not on education now. Education now was taking a minor role compared to the importance he was giving to spiritual training. So Meher ashram began on May 1st, 1927. And out of Meher ashram came Prem ashram, which was the apex of Baba's work for these boys, where he brought the icon of the Prem ashram, that is Abdullah Pakravan, we know as Chota Baba, to the 6th plane. This was all in Baba's work for the future. This work for the youth, for the boys, the girls too, was all happening there. The theme was what? Oneness through love. So now let's just go to questions.
That was a fascinating hour and a half. And I was really caught at the end when you talked about the archetypes of Baba's work with the different castes and religions of the world. Can you reflect a little more on that and what you might feel that will lead to?
One thing about the avatar in general, but specifically this avatar, is that he is universal.
Right.
So we see that throughout Baba's life. that whenever he had some special work, he had a special program, usually before that special work proceeded. And in that special program, he would incorporate something from each of the major religions so that through his followers who could represent that religion, and sometimes they weren't of that specific religion they represented, but through them, he could access that link to all the people in the world who were connected to that specific religion. It's not that Baba was religious for people to think, oh, well, Baba said prayers in different religions, and well, it's not the same. He didn't say prayers to say prayers in that way. He said prayers to engage. It was his great gift of grace to engage persons who followed those religions as ordinary people into his work. They couldn't do it. Only he could do it from his end. That's what we see happen. And through that, what we call the first long stay at Meherabad, there were people from all religions who had come. But one thing that we saw then, as we see now in Baba's atmosphere there, that these divisions melt away. For the real Mandali, there was never such a thing. They weren't concerned. There were a few people who had what you would call stubborn religious impressions, let's say, but they usually either faded away quickly or those people didn't last with Baba. Those old Mandali, they had an expression. He was living fire. He was living fire. And that fire burned away the false. You couldn't stay in his atmosphere for a long time, living in a superficial paradigm. Couldn't happen. Couldn't stay there. There was a period when Baba had Ajaba, the old carpenter, read from the Bible every evening for over a month. You know, it was during this time that Baba made certain remarks about Jesus and about what would be revealed in the future. It was also during that time, that month, August, after Baba had started silence, during that month of August that Baba revealed that Christ did not die on the cross. He traveled to India with Thaddeus and Bartholomew. And we know the exact date that Baba revealed that. It's in the combined diaries. He made other comments. It was during these early years that Baba one day pulled Dr. Ghani aside and told him of the shortcomings of Islam. They had lost the connection to mystical Islam through the orthodoxy of Shariat. It was the mystics that held the key and not orthodoxy. And Ali Ramju, our old friend who just died the other day, said that, you know, he grew up with Baba as Ramju's son, and they took Baba for granted. He was like a dear uncle to them. And he gave them things, and they always expected it. He said, yeah, we'd like to come to Meherabad. We wanted to come, and Baba would give us a nice mango or something. And then we could go and watch a movie at the Mandali cinema. That's what we were interested in. Baba was always there. Baba was Baba. Okay. What do they know about God? Shema, they didn't know. The other thing is, they were always living in that onslaught of the external world. Very rare is the person who could be with Baba and totally disregard that. You had to be some kind of a social misfit, or you had to be really courageous. And there were only a few people like that. I remember, Rustam and Saurav. I asked him once, you guys were kids, you had friends, you play and do all that, and what kind of remarks would they make? He said, yeah. You know how Baba's family was. We weren't well off. Baba kept us that way. So we had some old clunker bike, some bicycle, or somebody would say, oh, they'd look at our bike and say, yo, your uncle's God, huh? Why are you riding that piece of junk around? He said, nature of
your uncle's God. To Rustam and Zor.
So Ali said, getting back, Ali said, I don't know if you're aware of just the booklet. The last thing that Dr. Ghani presented to the world was, let's say, an essay on the failure of the Islamic world to accept the possibility of God as a human being. And he did it in his Ghani way, very systematically, citing his great depth of Sufi knowledge, not Orthodox Islam, but Sufi knowledge. And all he said when he read that, then he knew Baba was God.
Sure.
And that was until he was 20, 22 years old, that it really hit him. Now, Ali was appointed as a trustee. When his father, Ramju, died in 1967, then Baba put Ali on the board as a trustee. He will be the longest serving trustee in the history of the trust, because the rules are all changed now. But because he was placed there by Baba, he was lifelong. So he was there 53 plus years as a trustee. Nobody will ever have been that long.
He just died recently. I can't think of his name.
Not that he was extremely active as a trustee. He wasn't. But he was there. And he was solid.
Yes, he just.
And he contributed in his way.
So Dale has a question. Hi, Peter. Thank
Hi,
you.
Dale.
Hi. The stories are so beautiful, and I'm wondering how you feel the repercussions of Baba's work with the young people, the boys, the girls. If you see then the wave of it hitting the youth Sahavas and the incredible connection those kids have with each other and the love, primarily. They're like puppies rolling all over each other. And then the relationships
Maybe. Let's see as the years go by what happens, how friendly everyone is with each other. When you get down to it, I always remember the words of Bao. Bao used to remind those few of us in the spiritual training program. He would say, friends, this, that, friends. This is the real thing. This is it.
Being ground down.
That's it. And so all of that is good. It's fine. But it is part of the honeymoon. It's only when you get down to it and you see the history of the way the Mandali were with Baba, it is only the relationship with him that counts. But in the beginning, you have to experience that with other people. Eventually, you become like Kakabaria, whose attitude was, for all you people who die, only I will be here with Baba. Somebody asked Erich once in the hall, Erich, what it must have been like with all of you living with Baba. Oh, and Erich says, yes, it was like skinning each other alive. The good thing about it is that because of Baba, we know it's all illusion. Sometimes I remember when people would take things, this thing is this and that is that, and Marriage would say, why do you people take all this so seriously? But there's a fine line. There's a balance. Number one, do not shirk your responsibilities. Yet this is all illusion. We can't say it's all illusion, so I'm going to do what I want, because we are not exempt from the law of karma yet. So we have to work within the structure of the law to eventually get beyond it.
Yeah.
Baba's specific work with the youth was, to say this meant only that is compartmentalized thinking. Baba works simultaneously, universally, collectively, and individually for all of those people. And at the same time, those individuals who experienced, let's say, the spiritual training aspect of life with Baba as boys will be, according to Baba, people who have to take up a responsibility for the spiritual welfare of the world in those centuries later between the avataric advents. That's their responsibility. Yeah, they were given a great gift to have that time in his presence and to be advanced, but it was not for no reason. It was a very specific reason. And Ahmed said it was for that period, those future centuries between. The circle of the avatar also has to take positions, but it takes more than a few individuals. Bob explained at the time, before the Prem Ashram was officially established, there was a group of boys he called in the Prem group. See, what we say in that sense, Chota Baba wasn't really in the Prem Ashram because he was already made before the Prem Ashram. He was the first one. He was like an icon. And at the time, Baba put him in his own place when Baba moved everything to Toka. The table cabin was also shifted to Toka. And Baba kept Chota Baba in the table cabin, apart from everyone and everybody else.
Wow.
He had his own place. At other times, Chota Baba stayed with the Mandali.
Oh.
And so did some of the other advanced boys. When they had reached the point where, as Baba said, he had reached that point by the time he recovered, Baba raised him there to the sixth plane outside his crypt cabin, about where Mani's grave is now, on the evening of January 11th, 1928. And after he had recovered so that he wouldn't drop his body, then Baba had explained, he's done now. He's finished. He doesn't need any more preparation. The only thing he needs is the final touch from me, and that will only happen when the time is right. And Baba explained that will happen when the circle also has to take its positions. And Baba commented that he would become perfect in the future when he got that final touch. Baba said, he will do my work in Arabia.
Mystifying. Mystifying.
It's an example of how the avatar, during his physical lifetime, has to make arrangements and accommodate all those centuries.
Yeah.
Till he comes again.
Yeah.
And starts the process again. He's always working for that. During his physical lifetime, he's working for all of that future advent that begins the instant he drops his body. And that's the interconnection between advents. Remember how he explained that every time the avatar comes, he is playing the main role in the drama that the previous avatar, as writer, producer, and director, had already established. And in every advent, he is the writer, producer, director of the next advent that the avatar enacts, playing the main role.
Wow.
So the continuity just goes on and on.
Yeah.
He is the one, the eternally responsible ancient one.
Yeah.
Baba's explanations are like no others. No one has given what he has given. Not even close. If you look at one thing, if you look at, let's say, the divine theme charts, the divine theme, they're one little part of God Speaks, let's say. They've been added to God Speaks. The divine theme is something that Baba did in 1943 for a week or so. He invited those 100 and some men to Meherabad for that week or so in 1943 to present them with this publication, The Divine Theme, which had the two charts and the explanation. That became a feature as a primary means of meditation on the divine theme. If Meher Baba had done nothing else in his life except this thing that he did for a week or so in 1943, he would eventually been regarded as the greatest spiritual philosopher of all time. And this was only 1 week or so in 1943. Consider the vast range of all the other types of work. The work with the musts, the work with the boys, the work with women, the East and the West, and the seclusion, to integrate all of this stuff through his tremendous seclusion efforts. Then, on top of that, the medium of his silence to give that great impact. It is going to be beyond words. It will be monumental, stupendous. It will be just, really will be something. When it happens, eventually.
You just mentioned the subject of my question, which is, please share some of your reflections on what Baba was doing with the women at the ashram. You talked a lot about the boys and the male members of the Mandali.
Yes.
What was he doing with and for the women?
The primary feature of the women's ashram to me is, of course, Mera. And that core group of people who secured that atmosphere that Baba wanted around Mera. From the beginning, the time that we have just gone over, it reached its height in the 30s on the hill at Meherabad, in the same place where the work with the boys reached its height. That place where Baba finally established his tomb. It was there from the very beginning. People should never have the idea that, oh, Baba didn't really have a plan because he changed his mind so much. No, if you look back, certain things were always there. From the first time Baba went up that hill with Gulmai and he said, you know, this place is perfect for my work. And she said, it's yours already. He already had all of this in the plan. It was all there in the plan. His tomb was established as a simple cabin at the very time the Meher ashram was established on the hill in that specific spot. Why was it there? Because it was the most important place of his work in this Advent. That place was also where the work with the women was done. Why was this thing with Mera done? Why did Baba have Mera so isolated to the point not to even hear a man's voice, not to hear a man's name, of course, never to touch a man? None of that exposure during those primary years, especially before World War II, when that was all happening. What was that all about? It was about the purification of the universe. Mera, as Baba said, the purest soul in the universe. She played that role, the purification of the universe. And women had to play that role around Mera. Money was the next important one there.
By purification of the universe, to my little mind, it's so vast. What do you actually mean?
Well, by living that life specifically, was living that life, passing those years in Baba's company and always being in that atmosphere, that very pure atmosphere on the hill, which we still feel when we go there. It was free from the noise and the filth of the world. They had that atmosphere, and Baba kept it that way. And remember, they didn't sit there and meditate all day. They had to work and play and have the animals and then associate with the Western women before and during the war. Very important stuff. This was work with the East and the West. All of that was done. He brought the women to the West. You know, in France in 1937 before World War II, and then he brought them to America in 1952 and he allowed Mera to suffer. And that's beyond, can't even imagine what America will go through because of that. Baba had a great love for America, but that doesn't mean that America just wins the lottery. And through its most sought after aim has been to accumulate as much as possible and enjoy life as much as possible by making as little effort as possible. That is absolutely antithetical to the spiritual path. And America has become the epitome of rank materialism in the world. So that has to be changed, according to Baba. And Baba put it very politely when he communicated openly about it. But this is going to require a real... The catharsis has obviously begun. We've been observing it in the last few years. But it'll have to be, for some people, a shock to go away from this kind of thing.
What a place to end on, but end we must for our break. But Peter, thank you for this peek into an amazing time.
It's my great joy to do these things. It's just, I thank you for inviting me to spend time with you to just remember Baba.
Jay Bob.
That's what it is.
We'll see them.
Okay. We'll see you tomorrow.